Berlin, 1923. A man walks into a hospital. He is a physician. He has spent 12 years studying medicine. He has a degree from one of the best universities in Europe. He is being paid today, not in marks. Marks are worthless. He is being paid in 3 kilograms of potatoes and half a liter of cooking oil. That is his week's salary. His neighbor, a man with no university degree, no professional title, no savings, is doing fine. Because his neighbor knows how to fix engines. And in a collapsing economy, a running engine is worth more than a medical certificate. This is not a story about who was smarter. It is a story about who held the right skills when the system broke. And here is the thing that should stop you cold. The same skills that saved people in Weimar Germany in 1923 are the same skills that saved people in Argentina in 2001, in Venezuela in 2016, in every economic collapse in modern history. They are not complicated skills. You probably already have some of them. But most people never think about this until it is too late. My name is Max. I watch the past to understand the present. Let's find out which skills survive when money doesn't. Part 1. What a collapse actually looks like. Before we talk about skills, we need to be clear about something. Economic collapse does not look like a movie. It does not start with explosions and empty streets. It starts quietly, gradually, with prices that seem a little higher than last month, with a currency that buys a little less than it used to. Then one day, the little less becomes almost nothing. In Weimar Germany, inflation crept for 8 years before it exploded. In Argentina, the middle class had years of warning signs before the December 2001 freeze, when the government locked every bank account in the country overnight. People woke up one morning, unable to access their own savings. In Venezuela, it was a slow bleed, then a fast one. In every case, the people who survived best were not the ones who predicted the exact day of collapse. They were the ones who had already built something that paper money cannot replace. A skill. Part 2. Skill 1. Producing food. In every economic collapse in recorded history, this is the single most important skill. Not investing, not coding, not finance. Food production. In Weimar Germany, urban professionals, lawyers, accountants, professors, were among the hardest hit. Their salaries, their savings, their pension funds, all destroyed by inflation. But German farmers, they were the aristocracy of the crisis. They had something everyone needed, and they could name their price in real goods, in foreign currency, in whatever held value that week. The same pattern repeated in the Soviet collapse of the early 1990s. Russians with a dacha, a small country plot, had vegetables when store shelves were empty. They survived years of economic chaos on potatoes, cabbage, and beets grown on a few hundred square meters of land. In Venezuela today, the most resilient communities are those with any connection to food production. A family with a garden, a relative with a small farm, access to land. You do not need to become a farmer. But knowing how to grow food, even in a small space, even in a city, is a skill that has preserved lives in every collapse we can study. Part 3. Skill 2. Repairing things. Back to that Berlin mechanic. In a functioning economy, when something breaks, you buy a new one. In a collapsing economy, you cannot afford a new one, and the mechanic who can make the old one work again becomes essential. This is not abstract history. In Argentina, after the 2001 crisis, an entire informal economy of repair emerged almost overnight. People who could fix refrigerators, televisions, cars, pipes found themselves in enormous demand. They were paid in cash, in goods, in favors. The barter networks that sprang up across Argentina ran largely on the skills of people who could make things work. The same happened in post-Soviet Russia, in 1990s Zimbabwe. In every situation where purchasing power collapses and people suddenly have to extend the life of everything they own, the most valuable repair skills tend to be mechanical, engines, vehicles, basic machinery, electrical, wiring, appliances, generators, plumbing. Water is always critical. Construction, keeping shelter functional. Notice something about this list. These are all things that exist in physical reality. You cannot outsource them to someone in another country. You cannot replace them with an app. They have to be performed by a human being, in person with hands. That physical irreplaceability is exactly what makes them valuable when systems break. Part 4. Skill 3. Medical knowledge. The doctor working for potatoes was not worthless. He was invaluable. He was just in the wrong place. A formal hospital, dependent on a salary, in an economy where salaries had collapsed. The doctors and nurses who thrived in Weimar, in post-Soviet collapse, in Venezuelan hyperinflation, were the ones who worked informally, who would come to your home, who accepted payment in goods, who operated outside the broken formal system and inside the real one. Basic medical knowledge has always been one of the most tradable skills in a crisis. Not because people stop getting sick, they get sicker. Stress, poor nutrition, disrupted supply chains for medicine. All of these increase medical need at exactly the moment that formal healthcare systems are under maximum strain. Historical accounts from post-Soviet collapse show that people with any nursing knowledge, any ability to administer basic care, any knowledge of medicinal herbs and home treatments, these people became nodes in their communities. They were fed, protected, and supported by networks of people who needed what they knew. You do not need a medical degree. Basic first aid, knowledge of common infections and treatments, understanding of nutrition. These skills cost nothing to acquire and have saved lives in every economic crisis we know of. Part 5. Skill 4. Teaching. This one surprises people, but history is consistent on it. In Weimar Germany, private tutors, people who could teach languages, mathematics, music, maintained relatively stable incomes even through the hyperinflation. Because wealthy families, and families who still had some resources, continued to invest in their children's education even when everything else was being cut. In the Soviet collapse, informal English teachers were in enormous demand. Russia's sudden opening to the West created a desperate need for language skills. People who could teach English were paid in hard currency, dollars, at a time when the ruble was nearly worthless. Language teaching, in particular, has proven to be one of the most resilient skills across collapses, because it requires no equipment, no materials, no supply chain, only a human being who knows something that another human being needs to know. The broader principle is this: education does not stop during economic crises. It changes form, it moves out of institutions and into homes and community spaces, and the people who can deliver it informally become valuable in ways that formal teachers in collapsing school systems are not. Part 6. Skill 5. Trade and negotiation. This is perhaps the oldest survival skill in human history. Before currency, before banks, before states, there was trade, and when currencies collapse and formal markets break down, barter networks emerge with remarkable speed. We saw this in Argentina 2001, where a nationwide network of barter clubs, called Clubs de Trueque, emerged within months of the crisis and eventually involved millions of people. These networks ran on trust and on the ability to assess value, to know what something is actually worth in terms of other things, not in terms of a number printed on a piece of paper. The people who thrived in these networks were the ones who understood negotiation, who could assess the real value of goods, who had something to offer and could communicate that offer persuasively. This sounds like a corporate skill. It is actually a prehistoric one, and it returns every time the modern system breaks. Part 7. The pattern across every collapse. Let's step back. Weimar Germany, 1923. Soviet collapse, 1991. Argentina 2001, Venezuela 2016. Different countries, different political systems, different causes, but the same skills preserved lives in all of them. Food production, repair, medical knowledge, teaching, trade. What do these have in common? They all produce something real, something that exists in physical reality, something that another person needs in their daily life, something that cannot be printed, cannot be digitally created, cannot be made cheaper by a government decision. The great vulnerability of modern economic life is that most of us produce things that only have value inside a functioning system. Financial analysis, marketing, management consulting, software for specific corporate platforms. These things are valuable, enormously valuable, inside a system that works. But they are nearly worthless in a system that is breaking. The skills that have survived every collapse are the ones that retain value regardless of what the system is doing. Because they address needs that exist whether the economy is booming or burning. Part 8. What this means for you today. The United States is not Weimar Germany. Argentina's crisis was specific to its particular policy failures. Venezuela's collapse had unique political causes. History does not repeat exactly, but it rhymes, and the rhymes are enough to deserve attention. Today, the US national debt exceeds $36 trillion. Interest payments alone now cost more than the entire defense budget. The Federal Reserve has expanded its balance sheet to levels that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Inflation, which many people assumed was a solved problem, returned with force between 2021 and 2023 and demonstrated that it can come back. None of this means collapse is inevitable. Many economists believe the US has tools available that Weimar Germany never had, but the Weimar middle class also believed their system was permanent. The Argentine middle class believed the peso-dollar peg would hold forever. The Venezuelan professional class believed oil wealth made their country resilient. Every generation discovers, with shock, that the system they assumed was permanent was actually more fragile than it looked. The question is not whether you believe a crisis is coming. The question is what you are building while things are still stable. A vegetable garden, a mechanical skill, basic medical knowledge, the ability to teach something, the ability to trade. These are not survivalist fantasies. They are the historically documented tools of people who came through the worst economic crisis of the last 100 years with their lives and their dignity intact. Outrule, the skill the doctor learned too late. That Berlin doctor, the one working for potatoes, he did not starve. He survived. But he survived by learning, in his 50s, to grow vegetables in a window box, by learning to trade medical consultations for firewood, by building relationships with farmers outside the city who needed a doctor and could pay in food. He adapted, but he adapted late, under pressure, in the worst possible circumstances. The skills that saved him were available to him years before the crisis. He simply did not think he would need them. History does not give advance notice. It does not send a warning email before the banks freeze, before the currency collapses, before the supply chain breaks. It just happens, and when it does, the people who survive best are not the ones who predicted the exact date. They are the ones who had already built something that money cannot replace. My name is Max. I watch the past to understand the present. Build something real. Subscribe, and let's survive history together. See you in the next era.